I had believed for 19 of our 20 years that our marriage was perfect, a fortress built on trust, hard work, and quiet devotion that nothing could shatter. We had shared laughter in the early mornings over coffee in our modest three-bedroom home on Elm Street in suburban Springfield, Missouri, built a life filled with memories from family vacations to Branson in 2008 and quiet evenings watching reruns of old sitcoms on our worn leather couch. I poured everything into it, 2 full-time jobs, one at the local warehouse loading docks starting at 6 a.m., handling heavy pallets, and another delivering auto parts until midnight, 100-hour weeks where sleep was a rare luxury snatched in the recliner with the TV flickering. I would come home exhausted to our house smelling of her homemade lasagna with garlic bread lingering in the kitchen, collapsing beside her in our queen bed with the creaky headboard while she slept peacefully. Her breathing steady and innocent in the darkness of our bedroom with the cracked ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead and the faint hum of the refrigerator from downstairs. Then, on the morning of October 12, 2024, my phone shattered after I dropped it on the concrete driveway while rushing to leave for the warehouse shift, the screen spiderwebbing instantly. In a moment of desperate practicality on that cool autumn Saturday with fallen oak leaves crunching underfoot and a light mist in the air, I grabbed one of her old Samsung phones from the junk drawer in the kitchen for the drive to work. That single decision, born of haste and habit on a day when the sky was overcast with gray clouds threatening rain, cracked open a nightmare I never saw coming. An abyss that would swallow my life whole. As the screen lit up with unread messages under the dim glow of the truck's dashboard around 7:15 a.m., my world tilted violently on its axis. There they were, intimate texts from her male coworker named Mike. The one she had sworn time and again was just a female friend named Lisa picking her up from late shifts at the Red Lobster on Glenstone Avenue. He had written casually about the chilly night ahead on September 28 and how she should bring a jacket for warmth on their drive through the quiet streets. She had replied at 11:47 p.m. While I lay unconscious beside her from sheer exhaustion after a 16-hour double shift, asking if he made it home safe to his apartment off Sunshine Street with the porch light on. My stomach churned with nausea as I scrolled further at a red light near Battlefield Mall, fingers trembling on the cracked screen protector, uncovering a message from her close friend Sarah dated October 5, suggesting she could go work at Sam's Club on Republic Road and sleep with the boss too. The words laced with laughing emojis that implied this was no joke but an ongoing secret life spanning months of hidden rides and whispered plans. The betrayal burned into my retinas like acid, each word a dagger twisting deeper while the smell of fast food from a nearby McDonald's drifted through the open window. Heart pounding so hard I could hear it over the engine, I pulled over on the shoulder of I-44 around 7:45 a.m., the world spinning as suspicion turned to cold dread with semis rumbling past and horns blaring. That evening, back in our living room with the TV murmuring in the background on low volume and the scent of vanilla candle burning, I confronted her around 8:30 p.m. She met me with a wall of furious lies, her face twisting in calculated outrage under the warm glow of the table lamp. "How dare you invade my privacy like some jealous control freak?" she screamed, snatching the phone from my hands and locking it down with a new passcode I didn't know, her eyes flashing with a mix of panic and defiance that made me doubt my own sanity for a terrifying second amid the familiar surroundings. But the seed of suspicion had taken deep root, growing into a poisonous vine that wrapped around my thoughts day and night through the following weeks of restless sleep. I couldn't let it rest, the unanswered questions gnawing at me like an itch during my long shifts stacking boxes. Quietly, over the following days in late October 2024, I reached out to her coworkers from different periods at the Red Lobster kitchen, approaching each with careful discretion during their breaks at a nearby coffee shop on South Glenstone to avoid alerting her. 4 of them, Maria, who worked there in 2021, Tom in 2022, Lisa in 2023, and another server named Carla, independently confirmed the rumors that had circulated for years. Whispers about her and Mike passed like sizzling kitchen gossip over steaming pasta dishes and clattering pans in the hot grease. Filled back area. Details of stolen moments in the employee parking lot under flickering security lights and late-night rides in his blue Ford pickup. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, slicing through the foundation of our shared history as I sat alone in my truck on October 25, rain pattering on the windshield and wipers squeaking. Yet I buried it for the sake of the life we had built, swallowing the pain while she began accusing me of cheating despite my endless shifts that left no time for anything else, her words dripping with hypocrisy that festered like an open sore during arguments in our kitchen over cold dinners in November with the heater kicking on. The tension built slowly, arguments simmering beneath the surface until they boiled over in explosive fights that left me questioning everything as Thanksgiving 2024 approached with an uneaten turkey on the table and store-bought pie. After 4 agonizing months of this emotional warfare, on February 14th, 2025, Valentine's Day of all days with red hearts in store windows, I finally left, packing a small duffel bag with clothes, my steel-toed work boots, and a few toiletries while snow flurries fell outside the window. I found a girlfriend named Emily, someone who offered simple kindness and genuine conversation without the constant games, meeting her at a quiet diner off Route 66 in mid-February with the smell of pancakes in the air. My wife did not take it well at all. Her messages flooded my new prepaid phone like a digital storm through February and March, begging, pleading, promising change, with tearful voicemails sent at 2 a.m. 3 weeks later, on March 8, 2025, worn down by her relentless campaign and my own guilt over 2 decades of shared memories like our 2005 honeymoon in the Ozarks with cabin fires, I returned home against my better judgment, the daffodils just beginning to bloom in the front yard. But peace was nothing more than a cruel illusion. The moment I walked through the door that evening, the atmosphere shifted to something darker under the fluorescent kitchen lights. She demanded every intimate detail of my time away: who Emily was, what we did on our 2 dates at the park with the swings creaking, when it happened, where we met, why I chose her. Her eyes gleamed with a possessive hunger that chilled me to the bone, an intensity that suggested this was less about reconciliation and more about gathering ammunition for the storm ahead. I refused, sensing the trap closing in around our dining table with crumbs from breakfast still there, and that refusal planted the first seeds of her meticulously calculated revenge, a plan that would unfold with terrifying precision over the coming months. 4 months passed in a fragile truce laced with underlying tension that made every day feel like walking on cracked glass, with small fights erupting over groceries and laundry in May and June 2025 as summer heat built. Then came the trip that would nearly end me, a journey wrapped in false hope on July 18th, 2025. Stranded 15 long hours from home near Tulsa, Oklahoma, after my truck's transmission failed on I-44 during a parts delivery run with the engine smoking, with night falling and temperatures dropping to 72 degrees with humidity thick, I called her in desperation from a truck stop payphone. Around 9 p.m., the smell of diesel and fried food heavy in the air. She agreed to drive out from Springfield, her tone deceptively calm and helpful over the line, arriving the next morning in her silver Honda with the dented fender. When I finally climbed into the passenger seat around 11 a.m., on July 19, exhaustion heavy on my bones like lead weights after sleeping rough on a bench, she immediately launched into demands about Emily, probing with questions sharp as knives while the act blasted cold air smelling of her perfume. I shut it down firmly, reclining the seat and drifting into a restless sleep as we headed east on the highway, the tires humming steadily over expansion joints. 5 hours into the return drive, around 4 p.m. near Joplin, Missouri, nature called urgently at a remote exit with overgrown grass, a single vending machine, and cracked pavement. She pulled over, the car idling on the gravel shoulder. I stepped out with nothing. No phone, no wallet, just my jeans, t-shirt, and work boots stained with oil, and relieved myself behind a patch of scrub brush. The warm July breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers and distant rain on the horizon. The car door slammed shut with finality. Tires screeched on loose stones. She was gone. Vanished into the blackness of the curving on-ramp, taillights fading like dying embers, leaving me alone in the vast isolation with only the hum of distant semi-trucks and the rising panic clawing at my throat like invisible hands. Suspense gripped me like a vice as the reality sank in on that humid afternoon. No money, no ID, no way to call for help, miles of unknown Missouri and Oklahoma border terrain ahead with the sun beginning to set behind scattered clouds. The first night unfolded as pure survival horror under a cloudy sky. Coyotes howled in the distance around 10 p.m., their eerie cries echoing across the rolling fields like warnings from another world near the highway. I quickened my pace despite the fatigue weighing on my limbs, but the pain from old back issues slowed me dangerously on the uneven ground littered with litter. Then they came. Pairs of yellow eyes reflecting in the sparse roadside reflectors around midnight, circling with predatory patience that sent ice through my veins as crickets chirped loudly in the grass. My heart hammered as I broke into a desperate run, sweat soaking my shirt. I tripped violently over barbed wire separating the lanes around 1:30 a.m., the sharp, rusted metal tearing deep into my left calf, ripping flesh and jagged gashes that immediately welled with hot blood pouring down my leg in thick streams. Pain exploded through my body like fire, but adrenaline surged. I scrambled up and ran, stumbling blindly through tall grass, the pack closing in with snapping jaws and hot breath. Their teeth sank into my right leg, tearing chunks of muscle and skin in wet, ripping sounds that exposed raw red tissue and caused blood to spray in arcs with each shake of their heads. Another bite clamped on my forearm, crunching through skin and grazing bone with searing agony as warm blood pulsed out, soaking my sleeve and dripping onto the dirt. I screamed into the night, swinging my arms wildly at their shadows, the metallic taste of fear in my mouth, breaking free only to scramble up a weathered overpass sign for precarious safety, the rusted metal cold and biting under my bloodied hands around 2 a.m. My grip slipped in the frenzy of panic as one coyote lunged below with saliva dripping, and I tumbled down the steep embankment, landing with a sickening crack that twisted my ankle into an unnatural angle and sent spasms through my lower back on impact with a sharp rock, fresh blood mixing with dirt and gravel in the wounds. The fall left me gasping for air, vision blurring from pain and dizziness with blood loss making me lightheaded, but the coyotes lingered near, their low growls a constant terrifying soundtrack in the blackness mixed with the occasional whoosh of passing cars. I pressed on through the long night until dawn on July 20, each agonizing step a battle against collapse, leaving bloody footprints on the shoulder and covering what felt like 12 miles while blood soaked my jeans into heavy sticky fabric and fear clawed at my mind with every rustle in the brush. By mid-morning, I could barely manage 10 feet before collapsing in exhaustion and agony near a fence line, the world tilting as dehydration set in with cracked lips, pounding headache, and wounds throbbing with infection risk. Desperation mounted to a fever pitch as cars blurred past on the highway shoulder. I threw myself toward them in reckless attempts around noon, waving frantically with bloodied arms, leaving red smears, begging anyone to stop and help the broken figure I had become amid the July heat rising off the asphalt. Most swerved away, eyes wide with fear or suspicion at my disheveled, gore-covered state. Finally, a Missouri Highway Patrol officer pulled over around 2 p.m., his lights flashing blue and red, and took me to a gas station off exit 18 with buzzing fluorescent lights and the smell of stale coffee. Brief relief flickered as I used the station phone until I tried calling her kids multiple times with shaking, blood-crusted fingers. No answers, only voicemail. The attendant's wary glance confirmed my nightmare. My wife had already phoned ahead that morning, spinning convincing tales that painted me as unstable or dangerous, instructing them explicitly not to help a man matching my description. My brother agreed over the line to come after 3:30 p.m., but the hours dragged torturously to 9:30 p.m. With no sign of headlights in the parking lot. Another desperate call revealed her masterful manipulation. She had convinced him she was already on her way from Springfield, all lies designed to prolong my torment in the wilderness and break my spirit completely as mosquitoes buzzed around the station lights and my wounds continued to seep. When I finally reached what should have been the safety of home in Springfield on July 21, after hitchhiking fragments and sheer willpower with bandaged wounds from the gas station kit, a new layer of horror awaited like a twisted homecoming under the porch light. The house on Elm Street was locked tight against me, doors and windows secured with fresh deadbolts. My 2 cars sat disabled in the driveway, tires methodically flattened with visible puncture marks from a knife. License plates ripped off and discarded in the bushes, keys missing without a trace. In a frenzy of rage and disbelief around 11 p.m., I kicked in the side door, wood splintering loudly under my injured leg, only to find an empty, sterile shell inside, no toilet paper in the bathrooms, no clothes in the closets, no personal belongings like family photos or my tool set, nothing left to claim as mine. It looked staged for sale. cold and mocking in its emptiness with realtor signs already posted on the lawn by the next morning. The Springfield police, when finally called on July 22, offered only shrugs, excuses, and veiled suggestions that it was a domestic matter they couldn't fully intervene in due to he said, she said complications at the station. The next day, barely able to walk from the combined injuries and exposure, I scavenged an old Nintendo Switch from a forgotten box in the garage corner and used its limited Wi-Fi connection at a nearby McDonald's to access Facebook, pleading desperately for aid from anyone who might listen while sipping a free cup of water with trembling hands. A grueling trip to Cox Medical Center on July 23 brought painful rabies shots in my arm. The needle pricks a grim, stinging reminder of the coyote attack that still haunted my dreams with flashing teeth and yellow eyes. Returning to the house in agony that afternoon, I discovered she had slipped back in, undetected through the broken door, and stolen the switch, cutting off even that fragile link. My brother, in a rare act of kindness amid the chaos on July 24, bought me a basic flip phone in minutes for emergencies at the Walmart on Battlefield. But even that lifeline crumbled under her digital assault in the following days. She had hijacked my Facebook accounts entirely by July 25, posting as if she were me, claiming I was scamming friends for rent money with sob stories, sending out my private photos to strangers with malicious intent from old vacation shots, slashing prices on my disabled vehicles in desperate sales. Posts to anyone who inquired on Marketplace. The ultimate blow came like a thunderclap on August 1 when Springfield police stormed the location on her anonymous tip, arresting me for human trafficking with accusations so detailed they seemed plucked from a nightmare script. Her lies extended further, calling my warehouse job on August 2 and branding me a drug runner who used delivery routes for illicit gains. Though the fabricated charges eventually dissolved after weeks of investigation by mid-August, the damage was catastrophic. A month of scrutiny, drained bank accounts from joint holdings she emptied in July, total social isolation as bridges burned with family and friends. She had cleaned me out royally. Savings gone, possessions vanished, reputation in tatters across Greene County. I fought back through legal channels with what little strength remained in late August 2025, securing an ex parte order after an initial humiliating denial on August 15. But enforcement proved a bitter joke that highlighted systemic failures at the Greene County Courthouse. It means nothing if you're a man, I learned through painful experience as officers ignored her repeated violations and drive-bys past the shelter where I stayed. We patched things up in a toxic, codependent cycle by early September because true escape seemed impossible under the weight of shared history and her relentless presence at the property. Fights erupted weekly through September and October, each one more vicious, laced with accusations that dug up old wounds over cold coffee in the mornings. Shockingly, she befriended Emily around mid-September, dangling the friendship like poisoned bait to torment me further during awkward encounters at local stores. Drama consumed our days and nights for months on end into November. Then she began leaving her phone unlocked deliberately in late November, mirroring my earlier discovery in a game of psychological cat and mouse on the kitchen counter. Messages to her friends revealed her cold, calculated plan: stay only long enough to accumulate money and resources before leaving me destroyed by Christmas. She dismissed it casually as anger when confronted on December 2, her smile never reaching her eyes under the holiday lights we hadn't taken down. Tensions peaked in our latest explosive clash on December 12 over something as trivial as social media while snow fell outside. She accused me of avoiding Facebook friendship because I was embarrassed by her appearance in public at the Walmart. I countered with raw truth. Her betrayals and actions were the real barrier as the heater hummed in the background. We fell into an icy silence that crackled with unspoken threats that evening. I slept fitfully that night in our old bed, waking abruptly around 7 a.m. On December 13, to her smirking face hovering in the dim morning light filtering through the blinds, a predator savoring the moment before striking. Groggy with sleep still in my eyes, I got up for coffee in the kitchen, the routine offering false normalcy as the pot gurgled. Upon returning to the living room with a steaming mug, she delivered her taunt with chilling calm. Well, I don't have to worry about you having me as a friend on Facebook anymore. Confusion clouded my half-awake mind until she revealed with triumph that she had destroyed both my accounts overnight using my old login details. The inactive one held irreplaceable voice messages from my deceased sister who passed in 2019 and lost friends from high school, precious, haunting fragments of voices forever silenced, now erased in her final act of spite on that cold December morning. Rage boiled over uncontrollably in that moment. Years of suppressed pain erupting like a volcano in our living room. I lost control and said something I regret in the heat of the moment. She claimed I threw a watch at her during the scuffle, my memory blurred in the adrenaline-fueled fog of survival. Sirens wailed soon after, her calculated call to the Springfield police around 8:15 a.m. sealing the scene. They hauled me away in cuffs for felony domestic violence, ignoring the gun she had brandished and the terror she inflicted as neighbors watched from windows. In the cold Greene County jail cell later that morning, an ex parte order was slapped against me further, barring any return to the house that was once ours. A detective eventually listened to my full side of the story in an interrogation room that afternoon, piecing together the inconsistencies with notes on yellow legal pad, and somehow I walked free without formal charges by evening, yet she faced zero consequences for the armed threat that could have ended my life. Released in the exact same clothes from days prior, faded jeans, oil-stained t-shirt, and worn boots, I emerged into fresh devastation on December 14, immediately fired from my warehouse job for the unexplained absences during incarceration via a curt phone call, truly homeless with nowhere safe to. Turn in the December chill, no family answering desperate calls from the shelter payphone, friends long ghosted as she systematically sabotaged every new profile I attempted to create online at the library computers. 4 days later, on December 18, 2025, I remained trapped in this hell, wandering the edges of Springfield in the same blood-stained, torn clothes, my body still healing from coyote bites and falls with scabs pulling tight, my spirit tested to its absolute limit by the woman I once vowed to cherish. Through sickness and health. The days that followed the release blurred into an extended thriller of raw survival, paranoia, and quiet determination through the holiday season, with twinkling lights mocking me. Every shadow on unfamiliar streets near Commercial Street made my pulse race, wondering if she was lurking nearby in her Honda, orchestrating yet another layer of calculated ruin from the darkness with fresh lies. I scavenged for basic food like day-old donuts from dumpsters behind the bakery and shelter, my injured leg throbbing with every labored step on icy sidewalks, vivid flashbacks of the coyote attack invading my restless nights in abandoned spots or overcrowded shelters when I could find a cot. Friends who once offered support now blocked me entirely, fed a steady diet of her convincing lies through manipulated digital channels and whispered calls to mutual acquaintances in January 2026. One particularly tense night in mid-January, huddled in a shelter with the sounds of the city filtering in and distant train whistles, I began piecing together the full depth of her web, how the affair wasn't merely physical, but the ignition point for a long game strategy of revenge spanning years. With subtle manipulations planted even during what I thought were our happiest times, like our anniversary dinners at Outback Steakhouse with steak juices on plates. The suspense never eased. Her occasional drive-bys near the shelter on West Sunshine in early February, car slowing with that familiar, chilling smirk visible through the tinted window, kept me in constant vigilance, heart racing as I ducked behind parked cars. I documented every detail in a hidden notebook scavenged from trash, heart hammering at every approaching siren on the streets, fearing another false arrest that could spiral me back into the county jail. The gun incident replayed endlessly in my mind like a looped horror scene during sleepless nights. The cold gleam of metal under house lights. Her unnaturally calm eyes devoid of remorse. The power imbalance she had weaponized so effectively against the man who had protected her for decades with. Late-night security checks. Police bias cut the deepest at the station, evidence of her threats casually dismissed, while my outburst became the focal point of reports. Yet amid the wreckage of my life in the winter of 2026, a quiet, burning resolve began to grow within me as I walked the streets. This wasn't simply a messy divorce or end of a marriage. It was psychological and emotional war waged by a master manipulator who knew every weakness. I vowed silently to expose the full truth, one careful, documented step at a time. Gathering what proof I could while rebuilding from absolute zero in shelters and odd jobs. The woman I had loved and trusted for 20 years had transformed into a shadow villain whose outward charm masked a calculating darkness that fed on control and destruction. In the end, her carefully maintained perfect mask had shattered my entire existence, leaving me to forge an uncertain new path from the ashes, scarred physically from bites and falls, emotionally drained, stripped of nearly everything material and social, but unbroken in the core of my spirit. Determined to survive, and one day tell this story in full so others might recognize the warning signs before it was too late on some quiet highway exit.